My name is Vivian Hayes, and at 72 years old, I thought I had seen everything this life had to offer. I was widowed 15 years ago when my beloved Thomas passed away after 45 years of marriage. I've raised 3 children, watched 7 grandchildren come into this world, and built a life I'm proud of. Our family has always been respected in Vermont, not just for the fortune we've accumulated over generations, but for the values that have guided us. Honor, loyalty, and family have always come before anything else. But now, sitting on the porch of the family estate that has belonged to the Hayes family for more than 2 centuries, watching as the late afternoon sun bathes the vineyard stretching as far as the eye can see, I find myself facing a threat I never imagined would come from someone so close to my blood. It all began 6 months ago when my granddaughter Abigail, the light of my life, announced her engagement to Derek Preston, the son of one of the wealthiest families in Boston. I remember feeling a mixture of joy and apprehension. Abigail was only 25, and although Derek seemed like an educated and ambitious young man, there was something in his gaze that unsettled me. However, I pushed these thoughts aside. After all, young love tends to be impulsive, and I didn't want to be the bitter grandmother who stands in the way of her granddaughter's happiness. The first time I met Patricia Preston, Derek's mother, was during a dinner at our estate. She arrived dressed in ostentatious jewelry and a dress that seemed more appropriate for a gala than a family dinner. At 60, Patricia Preston was a woman who commanded presence. Tall, slender, with perfectly dyed blonde hair and a posture that betrayed years of etiquette classes. "Vivian, what a pleasure to finally meet you," she said, air kissing near my cheeks. "Derek hasn't stopped talking about you in this charming property." The way her eyes scanned our main hall, with its century-old beams and the family portraits adorning the walls, made me feel like she was evaluating a piece at an auction. "The pleasure is mine, Patricia," I responded, keeping cordial. "Abigail has told us much about you. Please, make yourself at home." Dinner proceeded without incident. Patricia asked numerous questions about our family, about the vineyard, about the winery my grandfather had founded and that my youngest son, Ethan, now directed. I attributed her curiosity to a genuine interest in getting to know her future daughter-in-law's family. How wrong I was. As the wedding preparations advanced, Patricia became a constant presence in our lives. She always had an opinion on everything: the ceremony venue, the menu, the guest list, and Abigail, wishing to please her future mother-in-law, yielded on almost everything. "Grandma, I understand that it might seem excessive," she told me one afternoon as we reviewed the invitations. "But it's important to Derek that his mother feels included. His father abandoned them when he was young, and she's made so many sacrifices for him." I bit my tongue. I didn't want to tarnish my granddaughter's happiness with my misgivings. But there was something about Patricia that triggered my protective instincts. One afternoon, while Abigail and Derek were in town organizing the final details of the wedding, I was in the library reviewing some documents when Sophia, Derek's younger sister, appeared at the door. We had never spoken much. She was a reserved young woman who seemed to live in the shadow of her domineering mother. "Mrs. Hayes, may I speak with you for a moment?" Her voice trembled slightly. "Of course, dear. Please, sit down." Sophia slid into the armchair across from me, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. She had the same dark eyes as her brother, but where Derek's were cold and calculating, hers reflected a vulnerable honesty. "I don't know how to say this," she began. And then, as if she had gathered all her courage, she blurted out, "I think my mother and Derek are planning something against your family, especially against Abigail." The air seemed to freeze in the room. "What exactly do you mean, Sophia?" "Last night, I overheard my mother talking on the phone with Derek. They were discussing your family's properties, about how they were going to ensure they controlled them once the marriage was official." Sophia swallowed hard. "They specifically mentioned this estate and the winery. My mother said something about Abigail being naive and easy to manipulate, and how you were just an old lady who would soon no longer be an obstacle." I felt as if someone had thrown ice water on me. But decades of facing adversity had taught me to maintain my composure in the most difficult moments. Sophia, are you absolutely certain of what you heard? She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I know how this sounds. I'm betraying my own family, but I can't stay silent. Abigail has been so kind to me, so different from the other people Derek has brought home. And you, her voice broke, you've treated me with more warmth in these months than my mother has in my entire life. I rose from my seat and approached the window, observing the oak trees that bordered the property. They had been planted by my great-grandfather, had survived wars, droughts, changes in government. And now, this internal threat. Why are you telling me this, Sophia? Because it's the right thing to do, she replied simply. And because I'm afraid of what they might do. My mother, she's not who she appears to be. She's been in financial trouble since the divorce. And she sees your family as her salvation, and Derek has always been obsessed with status, with appearing to be more than he is. I turned to look at her, seeing for the first time not Derek's sister, but a brave young woman who was risking much to do what was right. Thank you for your honesty, Sophia. Now I need to ask you a favor. Don't tell anyone about this conversation. Not even Abigail. Her eyes widened in surprise. But, Mrs. Hayes, don't you want to warn her? She has the right to know. And she will know. I promise you that. But first, I need to understand exactly what they're planning and how they intend to carry it out. If we confront Derek or your mother now, they'll simply deny everything and be more cautious in the future. Sophia nodded slowly, understanding. What are you going to do then? I allowed myself a small smile. I'm going to do what the women in my family have done for generations when faced with threats. Observe, learn, and prepare. The Hayes women aren't known for our beauty or charm, dear, but for our cunning. As Sophia left, I felt a cold determination settle in my chest. Derek and Patricia Preston had made a grave mistake in underestimating me. They thought I was just a sentimental old woman, easy to manipulate and deceive. They had no idea who they were dealing with, because if there's one thing I've learned in my 72 years of life, it's that patience is the deadliest of virtues. That night, I couldn't sleep. Sophia's words echoed in my mind like an ominous refrain. An old lady who would soon no longer be an obstacle. The coldness of that phrase chilled my blood. It wasn't just the greed that concerned me. It was the calculated malice it implied. What were Derek and his mother willing to do to get what they wanted? I rose at dawn, and while the rest of the house slept, headed to the study that had belonged to my husband. Thomas had always been meticulous with the family's financial and legal affairs. Every important document was carefully filed in the antique oak cabinet that dominated one wall of the study. I spent the next few hours reviewing papers, deeds, wills, contracts. I needed to understand exactly what protections we had, what vulnerabilities Derek and Patricia might exploit. The estate and vineyards had been in the Hayes family since 1789, when my great-great-grandfather purchased the lands with the gold he had amassed in the California gold rush. Throughout the centuries, the family had survived depressions, wars, and economic crises thanks to a combination of hard work and legal foresight. It was then that I found a document my grandfather had established in 1952, a family trust that protected the Hayes estate and Maine properties. The trust clearly specified that these properties could never be sold or transferred outside the direct bloodline of the family. Even in case of marriage, the properties would remain under the exclusive control of those born Hayes. More importantly, there was a specific clause about fraud and bad faith. Any attempt to inappropriately seize assets through deception would result in the immediate exclusion of all rights to any family property. A sense of relief washed over me. My grandfather, always cautious after having survived the Great Depression, had created a legal fortress around the family patrimony, but my relief was brief. The trust protected the properties, but not Abigail. If her marriage to Derek was part of a plan to access our fortune, my granddaughter would suffer a devastating betrayal. I decided I needed professional advice. That very morning, I called Jonathan Barnes, the family lawyer for decades. We had known each other since we were young. His father had been my father's lawyer, and Jonathan had continued that tradition of loyalty and discretion. Vivian, what a surprise to receive your call so early, he answered with his usual jovial tone. Is everything all right with the wedding preparations? Jonathan, I need to see you today privately, I replied without beating around the bush. A situation has arisen that requires your counsel. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Jonathan knew me well enough to know I wouldn't request an urgent meeting unless it was truly important. Of course. Shall we say my office at 11? I'd prefer a more discreet location. The Bluebird Cafe? Understood. I'll see you there. As I hung up, I noticed a movement in the hallway outside the study. For an instant, I thought I saw a shadow quickly moving away. Had someone been listening? I would need to be more cautious. The Bluebird Cafe was an old establishment in downtown Burlington, frequented mainly by elderly people playing dominoes and reading the newspaper. No one would pay attention to two older people conversing in a corner table. Jonathan was already there when I arrived, his silver hair perfectly combed and his usual impeccable suit. He rose to greet me with a kiss on each cheek. Vivian, you look worried, he said as we sat down. What's going on? I told him everything Sophia had revealed to me, as well as my discoveries about the family trust. Jonathan listened attentively, his expression becoming more serious with each word. The trust your grandfather established is practically impenetrable, he confirmed when I finished. No court in Vermont would annul it without extraordinary evidence that it was established fraudulently, which we know isn't the case. So, the properties are safe. Legally, yes. But I'm concerned about what you've said regarding the Prestons' attitude. An old lady who would soon no longer be an obstacle sounds disturbingly ambiguous. A shiver ran down my spine. Do you think they might try something against me? Jonathan leaned forward, lowering his voice. I don't want to alarm you, but we should consider all possibilities. What you've told me suggests we're dealing with people willing to manipulate and deceive to get what they want. How far would they go? That's what we need to find out. And Abigail? How do I protect her without shattering her illusions? The wedding is in 3 weeks. First, we need more information. Confirmation of Derek and his mother's intentions. Then, evidence that you can show Abigail so she can see the truth for herself. He paused, considering something. There's something else we can do in the meantime. We can modify your will and Abigail's prenuptial agreement to include additional protection clauses. What kind of clauses? Conditions stipulating that any proven attempt at fraud or manipulation would result in the immediate nullification of any economic benefit for the guilty party. We can make it look like a standard formality, nothing that would raise suspicions. I nodded slowly. Do it. And I need you to investigate the Prestons. I want to know exactly who we're dealing with. Jonathan looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. Vivian, you've always been a strong woman. But this is dangerous. Promise me you'll be careful. I smiled, though I felt no joy. I've survived a world war, a cold war, and the loss of the love of my life. Some greedy upstarts won't be my end, I assure you. Upon returning to the estate that afternoon, I found Patricia sitting in the garden with Abigail, both surrounded by decoration catalogs. My granddaughter smiled when she saw me, her eyes bright with excitement. Grandma, Patricia has wonderful ideas for renovating the east wing of the estate after the wedding. Isn't it generous of her to help us modernize the house a bit? Patricia gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Vivian, dear, I was just telling Abigail that these old houses, though charming, need to adapt to modern times. And since Derek and Abigail will be living here with you, I thought it would be appropriate to make some adjustments. The audacity left me momentarily speechless. This woman was already planning changes to my home, the house where generations of my family had lived. How considerate of you, Patricia, I replied with an equally fake smile. But you know how we old folks are, we cling to our traditions. Any change to the estate would have to be discussed with the whole family, of course. A shadow of irritation crossed her face, so fleeting I almost missed it. Of course. Of course. We were just exchanging ideas, weren't we, Abigail? My granddaughter nodded, though I noticed some confusion in her expression. Grandma, We wouldn't do anything without your approval. This is your house. Our house, I gently corrected, taking her hand. The Hayes house, as it has always been and always will be. I looked directly at Patricia as I pronounced these words, and I saw how she understood the implicit message. Her eyes narrowed slightly before composing an expression of affability. Absolutely, she said with forced lightness. The Prestons deeply respect family traditions. After all, soon we'll be one family, won't we? At that moment, Derek appeared in the garden, as impeccably dressed as always. He approached to kiss Abigail and then his mother before leaning in to kiss me on the cheek. Mrs. Hayes, he greeted with that charming smile that now seemed calculated to me. Am I interrupting something important? Not at all, I replied. Your mother was sharing her ideas for remodeling my home. If he noticed the emphasis on my, he didn't show it. Mom has always had an exceptional eye for design. You should see what she did with our Boston house after the divorce. She completely transformed it. I'd love to see it someday, I said, carefully observing their reactions. In fact, I'm surprised you've never invited us to see your home, considering how much time you've spent in ours. I saw a flash of alarm in Patricia's eyes. Derek maintained his composure, but I noticed how his jaw tensed slightly, an unforgivable oversight on our part. Patricia quickly responded, we must arrange it soon, though I'm afraid our house is much more modest than this wonderful estate. Modesty has its charm, I commented, and I'm sure it perfectly reflects the true character of the Prestons. The tension in the air was palpable. Abigail looked from one to another, clearly feeling that something was happening beneath the surface of this seemingly cordial conversation. Well, she finally said, trying to ease the atmosphere, what matters is that after the wedding we'll have many opportunities to visit each other. Family is the most important thing, right? Without a doubt, I responded, without taking my eyes off Patricia. Family is absolutely the most important thing, and protecting the family, its well-being and its legacy, is the most sacred responsibility we have. That night, as I prepared for bed, I reflected on my strategy. Patricia and Derek clearly underestimated my intelligence and determination. They thought I was just a sentimental old woman, easily manipulated with false kindness. Their mistake would be my advantage. I decided that for now, I would let them believe they were winning. I would let them think I didn't suspect anything, that I accepted their presence and their plans for our family as something natural. Meanwhile, I would work silently to uncover the whole truth and protect my granddaughter and our heritage. As I turned off the light in my bedroom, a thought formed with clarity in my mind. This would be the last time anyone tried to take advantage of the Hayes family while I lived. In the days that followed, I meticulously observed every interaction between Derek, Patricia, and my granddaughter. Like a hunter studying her prey, I began to notice revealing patterns of behavior. How Derek always steered the conversation toward financial topics when he was alone with Abigail. How Patricia discreetly inspected every corner of the estate when she thought no one was watching. The way mother and son exchanged complicit glances during family meals. One afternoon, as I passed by the bedroom Abigail and Derek occupied during their visits to the estate, I heard voices. The door was slightly ajar, and although I would normally respect their privacy, the conversation immediately caught my attention. We need to talk to her soon about the papers, Derek was saying, his voice low but clearly audible. Mom says it's better to do it before the wedding, when everyone is distracted with the preparations. I don't understand why it's so urgent, Abigail replied. Grandma isn't going anywhere, and after the wedding we'll have plenty of time to discuss how to manage the estate. Precisely because she isn't going anywhere, said Derek in a tone that made me shiver. Sweetheart, your grandmother isn't young, and these properties are complicated to manage. It would be better for everyone, especially for her, if we started taking control of certain responsibilities now. It's for her own good. I guess you're right, Abigail conceded after a moment. She has been so tired lately. And I know she worries about the future of the winery now that Ethan is thinking about expanding internationally. Exactly. And with my business experience, I can help her manage all of this. You'll see, soon she'll be thanking us for taking on these burdens. I quietly moved away, my heart pounding with fury. Derek's manipulation was evident. He was using Abigail's genuine concern for my well-being to advance his plan. And the most painful thing was seeing how my granddaughter, always so intelligent and perceptive, was falling into his trap due to the affection she had for him. The next day, I received a call from Jonathan. "Vivian, I have information about the Prestons," he said without preamble. "And it's not good." "I'm listening." The supposed family fortune is largely a facade. Patricia kept the Boston house and some appearances after the divorce, but it's mortgaged to the hilt. Derek has an import company that has had serious financial problems in recent years. There are lawsuits from creditors, unpaid debts. How have they maintained appearances then? Loans, many loans. And according to my source, several of those loans are due in the coming months. They're on the verge of bankruptcy, Vivian. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Abigail is their financial salvation. It seems so, and there's more. Patricia Preston has a record. 7 years ago, she was investigated for alleged fraud related to the sale of a property she managed for an elderly woman who was her close friend. The charges were eventually withdrawn, but the coincidence is disturbing, I completed. "Jonathan, I need you to accelerate the changes to the will and the prenuptial agreement, and I want all this information documented, with evidence I can show Abigail if the time comes." "I'm already on it." "But Vivian, there's something else that worries me. If they're as financially desperate as it seems, how far would they be willing to go?" The question hung between us, laden with ominous implications. "I don't know," I responded honestly. "But I'm not going to wait to find out. I'm going to talk to Ethan tonight. I need allies within the family." Ethan, my youngest son, had always been the most like me, pragmatic, observant, and fiercely protective of the family. As director of the Hayes Winery, he had proven to be a capable leader and an astute strategist in the business world. If there was someone I could trust to help me in this situation, it was him. That night, after everyone had retired, Ethan came to my room as we had arranged. His expression was grave as he listened to my account of the suspicions, Sophia's confession, and Jonathan's investigation. "There was always something about that man I didn't like," he said finally, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Too polished, too perfect. But I never imagined this. The question now is what we do," I said. "Abigail is in love, or thinks she is. If we confront her directly with our suspicions, she's likely to get defensive." "We need undeniable evidence," Ethan nodded. "Something she can't ignore or justify. And in the meantime, we have to protect her and the family without her knowing." Ethan remained thoughtful for a moment. "Mom, I think we should play along for now. Let them think we're falling into their trap. We could even give them a bit of rope to hang themselves with." "What exactly are you suggesting?" "Tomorrow I have a meeting with international investors who are interested in expanding the distribution of our wines. Derek has been insisting on participating. Until now I've refused, but maybe I should change my mind." A slow smile formed on my face. Understanding his plan, give him limited access to information about the winery, see what he does with it. Exactly. If he's really interested in helping the family as he claims, he'll act with integrity. But if his intentions are what we suspect, he'll give himself away, I completed. "It's brilliant, Ethan." My son smiled, a determined expression that reminded me so much of his father that it almost hurt my heart. "Nobody threatens our family and gets away with it, Mom. Not even Abigail's fiancé." The next day, as we had breakfast on the terrace, Ethan casually mentioned the meeting with the investors. "Derek, I've been thinking about what you said about wanting to get more involved in the family business," he said, serving himself more coffee. "Today's meeting with the Japanese might be a good opportunity for you to start learning how things work at the winery." Derek nearly choked on his orange juice. "Really? I mean, I'd be honored. I didn't know you had reconsidered my offer." Ethan shrugged with apparent nonchalance. "Abigail has insisted you have valuable experience in international trade, and I always say that new perspectives are welcome. Patricia, who had been listening attentively, couldn't hide her enthusiasm. How wonderful, Ethan. Derek has handled imports from all over Europe in his company. I'm sure he'll have a lot to contribute. We're only talking about observing for now, Ethan clarified, his tone kind but firm. Hayes Winery has strict protocols about who can make decisions. Family tradition, you know. Of course. Of course. Derek quickly nodded. I'm here to learn and support, not to impose my ideas. As I watched them interact, I noticed how Abigail glowed with happiness. In her mind, this was a sign that her family was finally fully accepting Derek, integrating him into our lives and traditions. Guilt briefly pierced me for using her happiness as part of our strategy, but I reminded myself that everything we were doing was to protect her. Grandma, isn't it wonderful? She said to me when the others had dispersed. Ethan is finally giving Derek a chance. I knew that with time they would see how special he is. I smiled and took her hand. Your happiness is the most important thing to us, darling. It has always been. Her eyes filled with tears. I know, sometimes I think I don't deserve any of you. You're the best family anyone could wish for. I hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of her hair, so similar to her mother's when she was young. You are our most valuable treasure, Abigail, much more valuable than any vineyard, any estate, any fortune. Never forget that. And as I held her, I made a silent promise. No one would break my granddaughter's heart without facing the consequences. No one. That night, Ethan returned late from the winery. I was waiting for him in the study, anxious to know how the meeting with the investors had gone, and more importantly, how Derek had behaved. You were right, Mom, he said as soon as he entered, loosening his tie with a tired gesture. Derek has no real interest in learning about the winery or helping the family. The only thing he wanted was to access the financial information. Tell me exactly what happened, I asked, pouring him a glass of the bourbon we kept for special occasions. Ethan took a sip before continuing. At first he was enthusiastic, asking the right questions, seeming interested, but when we started talking numbers with the investors, his attitude changed. He began interrogating them about possible expansions, market valuations. He even vaguely suggested we might be considering selling part of the shares. Sell? We've never considered such a thing. I know, the Japanese were confused, but I managed to steer the conversation back on track. Ethan placed his glass on the desk. After the meeting, I found him talking on the phone in the hallway. He didn't see me coming, and I could hear part of the conversation. He was talking to someone about us, about the winery's assets, and how they were even better than they thought. I felt my determination hardening even more. Do you have any idea who he was talking to? No, but I bet it was his mother. He also mentioned something about papers he needed us to sign before the wedding. He said it would be much more complicated afterwards. I nodded slowly. This confirms our suspicions. They're planning some kind of legal maneuver before the wedding, probably expecting us to be too distracted with the preparations to read the fine print. What do we do now? We continue with the plan. We let them think everything is going according to their wishes, while we prepare for the counterattack. I stood up, feeling renewed energy despite the late hour. Tomorrow I'll meet with Jonathan to finalize the changes to the will and the prenuptial agreement. I need you to keep an eye on Derek. Give him a little more access to the winery, but nothing substantial. And what about Abigail? When do we tell her the truth? The question that had been tormenting me. My beloved granddaughter, so full of illusions, blindly trusting a man who only saw in her a means to access our fortune. Not yet, I finally decided. We need irrefutable evidence. Something she can't deny. If we tell her now with just our suspicions and some indications, she might not believe us. Or worse, she might tell Derek, and then we would lose our advantage. Ethan nodded, though I could see in his eyes how much it hurt him to keep this secret from his niece. You're right, but we can't wait too long. The wedding is in less than 3 weeks. I know, I promise you I won't let it go that far. We'll find a way to open her eyes in time. The following morning, as I had breakfast alone on the terrace, Patricia appeared with her usual calculating smile. Vivian, what an early riser. Do you mind if I join you? Not at all, I replied, indicating the chair across from me. The coffee is freshly made. Patricia served herself a cup, adding 2 teaspoons of sugar with meticulous precision. I wanted to talk to you about something important, she began, her tone studiedly casual. Derek and I have been thinking about how to help you lighten some of your burdens. Managing this estate must be exhausting for you, especially at your... I suppressed a smile. So predictable. It's funny you mention it. I was just thinking about the future of the estate this morning. Her eyes lit up with barely disguised interest. Really? And what have you been considering? I've been reflecting on the family legacy, I said, carefully choosing my words. On how each generation of the Hayes family has had the responsibility to protect what our ancestors built and pass it intact to the next generation. Patricia nodded enthusiastically. Exactly what Derek and I think. And now that Abigail will marry him, it would be natural for them to start taking a more active role in managing all of this. She made a broad gesture encompassing the vineyards visible from the terrace. Natural. Yes, I conceded. But it's also natural that we want to make sure everything is legally in order. Family traditions are important to us. Patricia. Of course. Of course, she hastily agreed. In fact, Derek has been talking to a lawyer friend of his about some documents that might be useful. A simple formality to ensure a smooth transition when the time comes. The audacity of this woman never ceased to amaze me. She was openly talking about planning the management of my properties after my death, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. How considerate of him, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. But the Hayes have had our own family lawyer for decades. Jonathan Barnes handles all our legal matters. I saw a flash of irritation cross her face. Oh, but sometimes it's good to have a new perspective. Don't you think? Older lawyers can be a bit obsolete in their approaches. Jonathan is barely 50. Patricia, I would hardly call him elderly. I took a sip of my coffee. But perhaps it would be useful for your lawyer and ours to meet to discuss any documents before we sign anything. After all, we want to make sure everything is in order, right? Patricia visibly tensed. Well, I don't really think it's necessary to complicate things. They're just routine papers. I insist, I said firmly. If we're going to make changes that affect the future of the Hayes estate, I want Jonathan to review them first. It's the least we can do to honor the family traditions we were talking about, don't you think? Patricia found herself caught in her own rhetoric, unable to argue against the logic she herself had used moments before. Of course, she finally said, with a tense smile. I'll mention it to Derek. When Patricia left, I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. The first move in our chess game had been made. Now we had to wait and see how they would respond. I didn't have to wait long. That same afternoon, as I walked through the garden, I heard agitated voices coming from the small gazebo hidden behind the cypress trees. I approached silently, keeping my presence hidden behind the hedges. What do you mean she wants her lawyer to review the documents? Derek's voice sounded furious. You know perfectly well that if an experienced lawyer reads those papers, he'll immediately see what we're trying to do. And what did you want me to do? Patricia replied, equally agitated. I couldn't insist without raising suspicions. She's already quite wary. I thought you said she was just a sentimental old lady, easy to manipulate. That's what I thought, but there's something about her, Derek. She's more alert than she appears. There was a silence, and then Derek spoke again, his voice more controlled now. We'll have to change our strategy. If we can't get her to sign the papers before the wedding, we'll have to focus on Abigail. After all, she'll be the main heir. If we control Abigail, we'll eventually control everything. And how do you suggest we do that? The girl adores her grandmother. Precisely because of that, we can use her concern for the old woman's health. I suggest we start sowing doubts about her mental capacity, small forgetfulness, confusions. Insinuate that perhaps she's no longer in a condition to handle her affairs. My blood froze as I heard these words. Not only were they planning to steal my heritage, but now they were considering destroying my relationship with my granddaughter, making her doubt my sanity. It's risky, said Patricia after a moment. If they discover us, who's going to discover us? The old woman? Abigail? They're too trusting, too noble. That's their weak point, Mother. They believe everyone is as honorable as they are. Patricia sighed. All right, but let's be careful. We can't afford any mistakes now that we're so close. I retreated silently, my mind working at full speed. The situation was even worse than I had imagined. They not only wanted my money, they were willing to destroy family ties, to manipulate Abigail, to make me appear mentally incapable. The rage I felt was like a cold fire, a type of fury I had never experienced before. That night, I called Jonathan from the private line in my room. We need to accelerate everything, I told him without preamble. I just discovered they're planning to try to declare me mentally incompetent. Jonathan cursed quietly. Vivian, this is more serious than we thought. If they're really going to try that, they will. I heard them discussing it. They want to use Abigail against me, make her believe I'm losing my mind. We need evidence, Vivian. Recordings, witnesses, something we can use not only to stop them, but to prove to Abigail the truth. I know. I'm thinking of installing some discrete cameras in key areas of the house. If they're going to conspire, I want it recorded. It's a good idea, but make sure they're legal. We don't want to compromise any evidence due to legal technicalities. What about the will and the prenuptial agreement? They'll be ready tomorrow. I've included all the protection clauses we discussed, plus some additional ones. If they try any legal manipulation, they'll hit an insurmountable wall. Good. And Jonathan, thank you. I know this goes beyond your professional duties. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Vivian, your father was like a mentor to me. I swore to protect the Hayes family as he protected mine during the difficult years. This isn't just professional for me. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of my bed, feeling the weight of the situation. I had faced many challenges in my life, but never one that so directly threatened my family and everything we had built. A soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. Grandma? Can I come in? It was Abigail. I quickly composed my expression, eliminating any trace of concern. Of course, sweetheart. Come in. My granddaughter entered, dressed in her favorite pajamas, the ones I had given her last Christmas. She sat beside me on the bed, as she used to do when she was little, and would come to tell me her secrets before going to sleep. Is everything okay? She asked, studying my face with eyes so similar to my son's. You've been different these past few days. Just a little tired, my love. The wedding preparations, you know. Abigail took my hand in hers. Grandma, if it's too much for you, we can simplify things. The last thing I want is to cause you stress. I looked at her, feeling a wave of love and protection. My sweet, trusting Abigail. How could I protect her without breaking her heart? It's not the wedding that worries me, darling. It's it's seeing you grow up, taking your own path. It's part of being a grandmother, I suppose. You want the best for your grandchildren, but you also have to let them fly. Abigail hugged me tightly. Oh, Grandma, no matter what happens, you'll always be my rock, my anchor. Nothing will change that, I promise you. As I hugged her, I made a decision. I couldn't wait for more evidence. I couldn't risk Derek and Patricia starting to poison Abigail's mind against me. It was time to take more direct measures. Abigail, I said softly, pulling away to look her in the eyes. Do you trust me? She seemed surprised by the question. Of course I do. With my life. Then I need you to do something for me. Something important. Anything. Tomorrow, I want you to come with me to see Jonathan. There are some documents about the estate and your inheritance that we need to review before the wedding. I saw a flash of confusion in her eyes. Can it wait until after? I have the final dress fitting tomorrow, and then Derek and I were going to. It has to be tomorrow, Abigail. My tone must have conveyed the seriousness of the matter, because Abigail straightened up, her expression becoming more grave. All right, I'll cancel my plans. She hesitated a moment before asking, Is there something I should know, Grandma? Something you're hiding from me? I struggled internally. I wanted to protect her from the painful truth, but I also knew that Abigail was a Hayes. She deserved honesty. There are some concerns that have arisen about Derek and Patricia. I'd prefer to discuss it tomorrow with Jonathan present, so he can explain the legal implications. Abigail visibly tensed. What kind of concerns? Please, darling, trust me for just one more day. I promise I'll tell you everything tomorrow. After a moment, she nodded slowly. Okay, but Grandma, if you know something about Derek, something bad, I need to know. I'm going to marry him in 2 weeks. I know, my love, and I promise I won't hide anything from you after tomorrow. When Abigail left, I stayed awake for hours, planning every detail of what we would do the next day. I knew I was accelerating things, forcing a confrontation before having all the evidence I wanted, but I also knew that time was running out. If I waited too long, I could lose Abigail forever. Finally, near dawn, I fell into a restless sleep, only to be awakened by a strange noise in my room. I opened my eyes in the dim light and nearly screamed when I saw a figure standing by my bed. Who's there? I demanded, my heart pounding. Calm down, Vivian. It's me, Patricia. The honeyed voice did nothing to calm my nerves.
I didn't mean to wake you. I just came to leave you these sleeping pills.
The maid told me you've been having trouble resting. I narrowed my eyes in the darkness. I had never mentioned sleep problems to any of the staff. How considerate, I said, turning on the lamp on my bedside table. But I don't have trouble sleeping, and I certainly don't take medications that haven't been prescribed by my doctor. Patricia stood still, holding a glass of water and what appeared to be a pill in her other hand. Under the light, I could see her expression, a mixture of surprise and something darker, more calculating. Oh, it must have been a misunderstanding, she said, stepping back slightly. Lucy mentioned she had seen you walking around the house late at night. I assumed you had insomnia. Lucy has the night off. She's not in the house. A tense silence settled between us. Patricia placed the glass on the bedside table with a too casual movement. I must have confused it then. I apologize for the intrusion. I'll go back to my room. Patricia, I called her before she reached the door. What were you really doing in my room in the middle of the night? She turned, her face a mask of innocence. I told you, a simple misunderstanding. You really should consider locking your door at night, Vivian. You never know who might come in. The veiled threat did not go unnoticed. When Patricia left, I quickly got up and locked the door, also placing a chair under the doorknob as a precaution. Then I took the glass she had left and carefully stored it in a plastic bag I found in my bathroom. If she had really tried to drug me, I wanted evidence. With my heart still racing, I called Ethan from my room's phone. Despite the hour, he answered on the second ring. Mom? What's going on? I quickly told him what had just happened. His response was immediate. I'm coming right over. Don't open the door to anyone but me. 15 minutes later, Ethan was in my room, his expression a mixture of concern and contained fury. This has gone too far, he said, examining the glass I had saved. First, I'm going to take you to a safe place. Then we'll call the police. No, I replied firmly. I'm not going to flee from my own house, and we can't go to the police yet, not without concrete evidence. Patricia will simply say it was a misunderstanding. What if she was really trying to drug you, or worse? Then we'll get the evidence and confront her. But we have to be smart, Ethan. One wrong move and we could lose everything, including Abigail. My son looked at me with a mixture of frustration and admiration. You're the bravest and most stubborn woman I know, Mom. But at least let me stay here for what's left of the night. I agreed, and Ethan settled into the armchair by the window, determined to watch over my sleep as I had watched over his when he was small. The next morning, as we had breakfast early before the others got up, we planned our day. First, I'll take this glass to a lab friend for analysis, said Ethan. Meanwhile, you and Abigail go see Jonathan as planned. What if Patricia or Derek try to prevent it? Sophia has promised to distract them. She suggested they visit some wineries in Napa Valley, supposedly to choose the wines for the wedding. I smiled with approval. That girl has more courage than we gave her credit for. I'm glad she's on our side. Ethan nodded. She's fed up with her mother and the constant manipulation. She says Abigail is the first person who has treated her like a human being, and not like a decoration piece or an obstacle. A couple of hours later, Abigail and I were in the car, heading to Jonathan's office in Burlington. My granddaughter had been unusually quiet throughout the journey, looking out the window with a thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about, sweetheart?" I finally asked. She turned to me, her eyes reflecting a mixture of emotions. Everything and nothing. The wedding, Derek. The future, and you, Grandma. About what you might want to tell me that's so important it can't wait. You'll know everything soon, I promise. When we arrived at the office, Jonathan was waiting for us. He had prepared the meeting room with coffee, water, and some pastries, as if trying to soften what he knew would be a difficult conversation. "Abigail, Vivian," he greeted us with his usual professional courtesy. "Please, take a seat." Once seated, Abigail looked expectantly from Jonathan to me. "Is someone going to tell me what's going on? Because this mysterious meeting is starting to seriously worry me." I took a deep breath. It was the moment of truth. "Abigail, what we're going to tell you is painful, but necessary for you to know before taking such an important step as marriage." Jonathan opened a folder in front of him. "Abigail, we've been investigating the Preston family. Initially at your grandmother's request, but what we've discovered has confirmed our worst suspicions." As Jonathan presented the evidence, the Preston's debts, Patricia's previous cases, the recorded conversations where Derek and his mother discussed how to manipulate Abigail to access the family fortune, I saw how my granddaughter's face went from disbelief to pain, and finally to a silent rage. "This can't be true," she said, when Jonathan finished, her voice barely a whisper. "Derek loves me. He's shown it to me in 1,000 ways." "Abigail," I said gently, taking her hand. "I know how difficult this is to believe. I too wanted to be wrong, wanted Derek to be the man you believed he was. What if all this is a misunderstanding? What if there are explanations for all this that you're not considering?" "There might be," Jonathan intervened. "And if Derek can provide them, we'll be the first to apologize. But there's something else you need to know, something that happened last night." I told Abigail about Patricia's night visit, the glass of water, the mysterious pill, her face visibly paled. "No," she whispered. "They couldn't have gone that far. They can't be that monstrous." "Ethan has taken the glass to be analyzed," I explained. "We'll soon know if it contained anything dangerous." Abigail suddenly stood up, walking to the window, giving us her back. Her shoulders trembled slightly, and I knew she was fighting back tears. "All this time," she finally said, her voice broken. "All those conversations about the future, about our children, about building a life together. Was it all a lie? Was it all part of a plan to rob my family?" No one answered. There was no need to. The three of us knew the truth. After a long silence, Abigail turned to us. Her face showed a determination that reminded me of myself in my youth, when I faced my own battles. "What do we do now?" she asked. Jonathan and I exchanged looks of surprise. We hadn't expected such quick acceptance, nor an immediate willingness to act. "We have several options," Jonathan responded. "We can press charges for the possible poisoning attempt. If the analysis of the glass comes back positive, we can directly confront them with the evidence we have. Or, or we can teach them a lesson they'll never forget," Abigail completed, a new firmness in her voice. "We can let them believe their plan is working, and then turn the tables on them." I looked at her with pride and some concern. "Abigail, are you sure? That would mean continuing to pretend with Derek, going ahead with the wedding preparations as if nothing had happened." "I'm sure, Grandma." Her eyes shone with a mixture of pain and resolution. "They wanted to play with my heart, with my family, with everything I love. Now they're going to discover that the Hays aren't easy prey. We're predators when necessary. On the way back to the estate, Abigail and I finalized the details of our plan. Ethan would join us later, once he had the results of the glass analysis. Sophia would be our ally within the Preston circle of trust, keeping her eyes and ears open to any developments. When we arrived, we found Derek waiting for us at the entrance, his expression a mixture of concern and suspicion. "Where have you two been all morning?" he asked, kissing Abigail on the cheek. "My mother and I have been looking for you." Abigail played her part perfectly, smiling with apparent normality. "We went to see Jonathan about some estate papers. Boring inheritance and trust stuff." Derek visibly tensed. "Papers? What kind of papers exactly?" "Oh, you know, the usual." Abigail waved her hand dismissively. "Grandma wants to make sure everything is in order before the wedding, so we can take the reins of the estate and the winery without problems. When she can no longer take care of everything." Derek's expression subtly changed, the weariness giving way to barely disguised interest. "That's very considerate of her. And what exactly did you decide?" "All in good time, honey," Abigail replied, kissing him lightly. "First let me change. I'm exhausted. I'll tell you everything at dinner." As Abigail went upstairs, Derek looked at me, trying to read some clue on my face. "Mrs. Hayes, I hope we haven't done anything to cause you concern." "Not at all, Derek," I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I'm just making sure that Abigail and you have everything you need to start your life together. After all, you are the future of this family." Dinner that night was a masterpiece of acting by all of us. Abigail, radiant and apparently in love, sharing details about our supposed plan to gradually transfer control of the family properties to them after the wedding. Ethan, cordial and open, discussing future projects for the winery in which Derek could participate. Me, playing the role of the compliant grandmother who only wants to see her granddaughter happy. Patricia and Derek could barely hide their satisfaction. They exchanged complicit glances, asked seemingly innocent questions about property values, international contacts, bank accounts. Every answer we gave seemed to confirm to them that their plan was working, that they would soon have access to everything they coveted. Sophia, for her part, observed everything with a mixture of amazement and admiration for our performance. Occasionally, our gazes would meet, and I could see in her eyes a new respect for the Hays. After dinner, as everyone retired to their rooms, Ethan gave me a discreet signal to follow him to the study. "I have the results of the analysis," he said once he closed the door behind us. "And they're not good, Mom." The water contained a considerable dose of a potent sedative, the kind used to put patients to sleep before major surgeries. A chill ran down my spine. "Enough to cause me harm. Enough to leave you completely unconscious for hours. And combined with your age and your history of blood pressure, yes, it could have been very dangerous." "Have you informed the police?" Ethan nodded. "I've spoken with Inspector Reynolds, an old family friend. He's preparing a search warrant, but we need more evidence for the charges to be solid." "And the plan for tomorrow?" I asked. "All set. Jonathan will bring the falsified documents for them to sign, thinking they're gaining control of everything. In reality, they'll be confessing their intentions in writing." I nodded, feeling a mixture of anticipation and regret. I never thought we'd have to resort to these kinds of stratagems in our own home. Ethan put a hand on my shoulder. "It's they who brought war to our home, Mom. We're just defending ourselves." That night, as I prepared for bed with the door firmly locked, I reflected on everything that had happened in the past few weeks. My heart broke for Abigail, who had believed she'd found true love only to discover it was an elaborate facade. But I also felt a fierce pride in the strength she was demonstrating. She was a true Hayes. The next morning, everything was ready for the final confrontation. Jonathan arrived early with the prepared documents, a mixture of legitimate agreements about the future management of the estate and hidden clauses that would act as proof of the Prestons' true intentions. We all gathered in the main hall: Derek and Patricia, Abigail and I, Ethan, Jonathan, and Sophia. The atmosphere was tense beneath the surface of cordiality. "Well," Jonathan began, spreading the documents on the antique table that had belonged to my grandfather. As we discussed, these are the agreements for the progressive transfer of the administration of the Hayes properties to Abigail and Derek after the wedding. Patricia couldn't hide her enthusiasm. It's such a sensible step, Vivian. I assure you, they'll take care of everything with the same love and dedication you've shown all these years. I'm sure they will, I replied with a serene smile. Before we begin, would anyone like some coffee? It's going to be a long session. I'll get it, Abigail offered, quickly standing up. This was the signal we had agreed upon. While Abigail left for the kitchen, Jonathan began to explain the documents, specifically pointing out the parts that would grant Derek and Patricia access to the family properties and accounts. As you'll see, we've been quite generous, he explained. Practically everything that belongs to the Hayes would eventually pass to your joint control. Derek could barely contain his satisfaction. It's the most logical thing, considering that Abigail and I are going to be the next generation at the head of the family. Exactly, Jonathan nodded. And here, on page 7, we've included the details about the Swiss accounts and foreign investments. Patricia leaned forward eagerly. Swiss accounts? Vivian, you never mentioned you had assets abroad. There are many things I don't mention. Patricia, I responded calmly. A woman must keep some secrets, don't you think? At that moment, Abigail returned, not with coffee but accompanied by Inspector Reynolds and 2 uniformed officers. Derek Preston, Patricia Preston, said the inspector, advancing toward the table. I have a warrant to search your rooms and your personal belongings in relation to an investigation of attempted assault with toxic substances. Patricia's face instantly paled. Derek stood up, his facade of charm completely vanished. What the hell is this about? He demanded, looking accusingly at Abigail. What have you done? No, Derek, my granddaughter responded, her voice firm. The question is, what have you done? Or rather, what have you and your mother tried to do? Jonathan collected the documents from the table. These agreements are fake, by the way. They were specifically designed to see how far you would go with your plan. Plan? What plan? Patricia tried to maintain her stance of innocence. Vivian, this is a terrible misunderstanding. We only wanted what was best for the family. Spare us the theater, Mother, Sophia intervened, stepping forward to stand beside me. I've heard both of you. I know exactly what you were planning to do, and I've declared it all before a notary. Inspector Reynolds nodded toward his officers, who headed upstairs to begin the search. Besides the attempt to drug Mrs. Hayes, we have information about possible fraud, blackmail, and conspiracy to misappropriate someone else's assets. This is ridiculous, Derek scoffed. You don't have proof of anything. Don't we? Asked Ethan, pulling a small recorder from his pocket. He pressed a button, and Derek's voice filled the room. If we can't get her to sign the papers before the wedding, we'll have to focus on Abigail. After all, she'll be the main heir. If we control Abigail, we'll eventually control everything. And then, Patricia's voice. And how do you suggest we do that? The girl adores her grandmother, Derek. Again, precisely because of that. We can use her concern for the old woman's health. I suggest we start sowing doubts about her mental capacity. Small forgetfulness, confusions, insinuate that perhaps she's no longer in a condition to handle her affairs. The silence that followed was absolute. Patricia had collapsed in her chair, all pretense abandoned. Derek looked around like a cornered animal, seeking a way out. Abigail, he finally said, his voice pleading. You can't really believe that it was all a lie. What we had was real. Don't you dare, Abigail interrupted him, her voice trembling with contained rage. Don't you dare pronounce that word. Not after what you've tried to do to my family, to my grandmother. She approached me, taking my hand. Fortunately for you, we won't press charges for attempted fraud or manipulation, as long as you sign a waiver of any claim to our properties and commit to never contacting us again. And if I refuse, Derek challenged, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Then, Inspector Reynolds intervened. We'll proceed with the full charges for the attempted poisoning which the laboratory has confirmed, And believe me, Mr. Preston, that would mean many years in prison for you and your mother. Patricia rose, staggering. This is a terrible mistake. I never tried to poison anyone. It was just a sedative to help her sleep. An unprescribed sedative, in a dangerously high dose, administered without consent. Jonathan specified. The law considers it attempted assault, at the very least. Derek and Patricia exchanged defeated looks. Finally, Derek extended his hand toward the papers that Jonathan now placed before them, the real waiver documents. We'll sign, he said, all his arrogance gone. But this doesn't end here. Oh, yes, it does, I responded, looking him directly in the eyes. It ends exactly here and now. You'll sign these papers and walk out of our lives forever. Or you'll go to jail for a very, very long time. After they signed, Inspector Reynolds escorted them out. He gave them 24 hours to collect their belongings and leave Vermont, with the warning that they would be under surveillance. When the door closed behind them, the silence in the hall was profound. Abigail, who had maintained an admirable composure throughout the entire confrontation, finally let the tears flow. I hugged her tightly, feeling her body tremble against mine. I'm so sorry, my love, I murmured against her hair. I'm sorry you had to go through this. No, Grandma, she responded between sobs. I'm the one who's sorry. I should have seen through their lies. I should have trusted my instinct when something didn't seem quite right. I almost allowed them to destroy our family. That would never have happened, Ethan intervened, joining our embrace. We're the Hayes. We've survived worse storms. Sophia remained apart, observing us with a mixture of longing and shame. I pulled away from Abigail and Ethan and approached her. Sophia, I said softly, without you, without your courage to tell us the truth, who knows what would have happened? We owe you our gratitude. Her voice trembled. I'm so sorry for what my family tried to do to you. What my mother and Derek planned. You're not responsible for their actions, Abigail responded, approaching as well. On the contrary, you've shown more integrity and courage than either of them. What will you do now? I asked her. Do you have somewhere to stay? Sophia shook her head. Not really. I suppose I'll look for an apartment in Boston, try to find work. Or you could stay here, Abigail proposed. At least for a while. The estate is big, and frankly, I think I could use the company of someone who understands exactly what I'm going through. Sophia looked at her with surprise. After what my family tried to do to you, you'd let me stay? Sophia, I said, taking her hand. You've demonstrated that true family isn't always blood, but the one we choose with our heart, and we choose you. That night we had dinner together on the terrace, under the stars that had watched generations of Hayes pass through this same estate. Abigail's pain was palpable, but so was her strength. Sophia seemed to flourish hour by hour, like a plant that finally receives light after a long darkness. You know what? Said Ethan, raising his wine glass. I propose a toast to the Hayes family for surviving another storm. To family, Abigail agreed, also raising her glass. True family. And to lessons learned, I added. To knowing that sometimes the most dangerous threats come wrapped in the most attractive packages, and that true loyalty often comes from where we least expect it. Sophia timidly raised her glass. To the opportunity to start anew, to the generosity that turns strangers into family. As we toasted under Vermont's starry sky, I felt a profound gratitude. At 72, I had learned once more that life never stops surprising us, challenging us, teaching us, and that the Hayes, like the vineyards they had cultivated for generations, had roots too deep to be uprooted by any storm. 6 months later, the estate had returned to its normal rhythm. Abigail, having overcome the grief for what she had believed to have with Derek, had immersed herself in the winery work alongside Ethan, discovering a passion and talent for the business that no one had suspected before. Sophia, for her part, had found her place in our family with surprising quickness. Her gentleness and eye for detail had made her an invaluable collaborator in the renovation of part of the estate to turn it into a small rural hotel, a project we had been considering for years and that was finally taking shape. As for me, I enjoyed my days with a new appreciation for life and for the family I had built. The Prestons' betrayal had been painful, but it had also strengthened us, shown us what we were really made of. One afternoon, as I had tea in the garden with Sophia, I was surprised to see an unknown car arrive along the entrance path. The vehicle stopped in front of the house, and from it descended a middle-aged man, tall and distinguished, with hair sprinkled with gray. "Are we expecting a visit?" asked Sophia, as surprised as I was. "Not that I know of," I replied, standing up to receive the stranger. The man approached with a confident but respectful step, stopping at a prudent distance. "Mrs. Vivian Hayes?" he asked, his deep and educated voice. "The same," I replied. "How can I help you?" "My name is Michael Preston," he introduced himself, causing both Sophia and me to instantly tense. Was Derek's older brother." "Was?" asked Sophia, stepping forward. A shadow of pain crossed Michael's face. "Derek passed away 2 weeks ago. A car accident in Mexico where he had taken refuge after what happened here." The news impacted me more than I would have expected. Despite all the harm he had tried to cause us, the death of someone so young is always a tragedy. "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. "And Patricia?" "My mother is in a psychiatric hospital," Michael replied with a tense voice. The news of Derek's death affected her deeply. "The doctors aren't sure if she'll recover." An uncomfortable silence fell. Finally, Sophia spoke. "Michael, what exactly are you doing here?" He looked at her with a mixture of surprise and recognition. "Sophia, I didn't expect to see you here. This is my home now," she responded with a firmness that filled me with pride. Michael nodded slowly. "I'm glad you've found a place where you belong." He turned to me. "Mrs. Hayes, I've come to apologize. For my family. For what they tried to do to you and yours." "Were you aware of their plans?" I asked, studying his face for signs of deception. "Not until after, when everything came to light. I separated from my mother and Derek years ago, precisely because of their way of being. But when I learned what they had tried to do, when I read the police reports," he shook his head with evident shame. "I felt I had to come personally to express my regret, though I know an apology doesn't repair the damage caused." I considered his words. There was sincerity in them, and a pain that seemed genuine. After all, he too had lost his family, albeit in a different way than Derek had tried to take ours from us. "I appreciate your visit, Mr. Preston," I finally said. "Would you like to have some tea with us? I think there are many stories to share." The surprise on his face gave way to visible relief. "It would be an honor, Mrs. Hayes." That afternoon, sitting in the garden under the Vermont sun, we listened to Michael's story, how he had distanced himself from his family, unable to bear Patricia's constant manipulations, how he had built his own life as a university professor in Chicago, how he had learned of Derek's wedding plans from the newspapers, and had tried unsuccessfully to contact his brother to warn him not to follow in their mother's footsteps. In turn, we told him our version of events, softening some details so as not to reopen unnecessary wounds. Sophia spoke of her new life with us, of the peace she had found away from Patricia's toxicity. When he finally left, promising to stay in touch, I found myself thinking about the strange turns life takes. How sometimes families break and reconfigure, how pain can give way to new beginnings, and how true strength isn't in never falling, but in rising every time life knocks us down. That night, as we all had dinner together, Abigail, Ethan, Sophia, and I told them about Michael's visit and the news he had brought. "Derek dead?" Abigail turned pale. "I don't know how to feel about that." "It's normal to be confused," I said gently. "He was important to you, even if in the end he turned out to be a disappointment." "It's not just that," she confessed. "It's that, despite everything, I can't be happy about his death. I can't help but think about what his life could have been if he had made different decisions, if he hadn't followed the path his mother laid out for him. That speaks to your good heart, said Ethan, squeezing her hand. And it's one of the reasons we're so fortunate to have you in our family. Family? Murmured Sophia, looking thoughtfully at her plate. It's curious how life redefines that concept. A year ago, my family was Patricia and Derek. And now, and now you're an honorary Hayes, I completed, smiling. Because as I've always said, family isn't just a matter of blood. It's a matter of loyalty, of love, of being there when it matters. Abigail raised her glass. To family then, to the one we're born into, and the one we choose. To family, we all responded in unison. As I observed these people, I loved sharing laughter and confidences around the table. I thought about everything we had been through. The trail had struck us at the very heart of our home, threatening to destroy everything we valued, but it had also reminded us who we really were. Not just the owners of a historic estate or a prestigious winery, but the heirs of a tradition of strength, intelligence, and family love that no external greed could ever break. And I, at 72, had perhaps learned the most valuable lesson of all, that life never stops surprising us, challenging us, teaching us, and that as long as we have the courage to face those challenges together, as a family, there is no trap or threat we cannot overcome. Because at the end of the day, the true inheritance of the Hayes wasn't the vineyards, or the centuries-old estate, or the bank accounts that the Prestons had coveted. Our true inheritance was this: the ability to stand together in the face of adversity, to welcome new members into our circle, and to rebuild what the storm tried to tear down. And that, I thought as I contemplated my family gathered under the roof that had sheltered so many generations before us, was the most valuable inheritance we could pass on to those who would come after.